So today we're going to be blunt about dead discipleship. And what that means is that it's no longer cool to be Christian unless it's cool to be Christian. Unless, there's that person that you follow, that person you look at, and they're doing it, or, your pastor tells you to like or share something, or that, everybody in the congregation should get up and actually do something. And then that's whenever discipleship becomes important. So to me, that's a form of dead discipleship. It's doing something, but it's not doing what discipleship is actually supposed to be doing, which is the definition of discipleship. It helps believers grow in their faith, to grow in maturity and wisdom, and to build their faith on a strong foundation. Now, your pastor can give you that foundation. Your pastor can, give you those tools to help build up that foundation. But then, as disciples ourselves, we're supposed to go out. As part of the Great Commission, is to go out and find other disciples, to build up other disciples. And with dead discipleship, it's discipleship for the simple fate of being discipleship. I look at it as like the show where you have, these movies, these shows where you have, like The Walking Dead. You have these people that are people, but they're zombies. They're just walking around. They're not the same as they once were. They're not that person they once were, but they have no emotion. They have nothing that they're doing like the other people. And I look at sometimes as Christians, we do that to those people that we're supposed to reach, and we do that to one another. And over the next however long, we're gonna touch on that. So the first thing, whenever I was studying for this, was I went to Luke 12, and I'm using the Message translation for this one because I think it says it the most realistic way. Because I think in society today, when we feel like we're supposed to disciple, you have those street preachers that they preach a word, but they use thuses and thous. They don't speak like actual people speak today. They try to make themselves or glorify themselves by speaking in, some old English writing. So the Message translation says, "Stand up for me among the people you meet, and the Son of Man will stand up for you before all God's angels. But if you pretend you don't know me, do you think I'll defend you before God's angels?" So the first thing we're going to go at when we're talking about the dead discipleship are those Christians, I guess you could say, that put this nicely. Those Christians that are Christians on Sundays and Wednesdays, and when they find a good meme. Those people that you look at their social media feed, or you look at them in person, and you do not see that they're Christians at all. And I was that Christian at one time. When I first came, I look at it kind of like I came back to Christ. I was baptized when I was real little, for my reasons, but I never really did what I was supposed to do. Like, people, couldn't have looked at me and said, "Oh, he's a Christian," because I didn't live that way. And I think as Christians more and more today, we do that. We have this mindset that it's not cool to share things we're doing about Bible study. It's not cool to talk about what we're doing, but it is cool to do whenever we're being watched. Whenever those people that we've allowed to have some force in our life, that we allow to speak in our life. It's cool as long as they see it. It's not something we do every day, and it's not something we keep up with, really. Like, there's times where I've felt tired of sharing, if that makes sense, which is crazy because it's something you're never supposed to tire of. There's this writer, this blog that I came across, and she had a really good point. Her name's Deborah Ike. She came up with 9 discipleship characteristics every Christian should know. Because when we're talking about dead discipleship, these are those things that you should constantly be doing. Discipleship is something you should constantly be doing. You're getting gas. You're you're taking your kid to school. Like you could disciple to them, your children. I mean, as parents, that's something you should always be doing. But it's those moments of something that you constantly be able to move in. But the first one she has said is love for one another. Now I'm one of those guys who. There's people I know that the other guys, and they'll say out of love in Christ that I love you, and to me that is for the longest time, and I'm slowly getting over. That's the weird. Like having another guy tell me he loves me, it's just something that it took a long time for me to be. They mean it out of Christ, because like to me, like the only people you really say you love to are, as one of my old friends say, people with my last name. If they didn't have my last name, I wasn't going to tell them I love them, because they aren't related to me. They're not relation to me. But I didn't look at it as, you're supposed to love one another. And I took it as, they were just, cornballs. The second one she had was obedience to the Great Commission. Now, this is why I wanted to make this one, this biblically blunt episode, was the obedience to the Great Commission. I've been to places where you see people, they'll fight. It almost seems like at times if they had like boxing gloves, they would fight to be able to sit closest to the pastor, or sit closest to the person that is preaching that day, and it's weird, weird to me. But they're supposed to be trying to get closer to God and get closer to that Great Commission, to the things they're supposed to be doing, the going out, the teaching, the preaching, the sharing of God's word. And it says, they're supposed to go make disciples of all the nations. Now, I may hit this up again later on, but the one thing about that Great Commission is it's gotta be genuine. Like when you go and try to make disciples, when you go tell people about God, it has to be genuine. Like you have these, I've used it. I was talking to somebody today that I call it click-bate Christianity. It's those people that, and some people do it out of real love, but a lot of times I've seen it. It's those people that you're supposed to copy and paste this. They don't read, they don't study, they don't look at what that verse is saying. Basically, as somebody at some beginning point said, if you believe in God, if you love God, you have to like and share. And if you love Satan, then you're not going to share this. You're not going to paste it. You're not going to send it to all your friends. And that to me is clickbait Christianity. That's not creating real disciples. That's creating a fear, or not even a fear. That's preying on those people who want a real relationship with God, and then when they finally do come and look at that verse, or they do see it, that it just becomes a thing they do. They redo the same thing that's always been done. They like share, but they doesn't feed into them. It's not something that gives bread. It's just a cool clip, or it's a nice little message that is wrapped up in a nice bow, but doesn't really have any weight to actually build that disciple up. Number 3 she came up with was continual pursuit of truth, which goes back to what I had just said. She mentioned John 8:31-32. Jesus told the Jews who believed in him, hold to my teaching, and that the truth will set you free. Now, a continual pursuit of truth, and this one thing my pastor has always told us is always, always, always go back and study it for yourself. And the thing with the death of discipleship is that we are now just regurgitating, we're resharing somebody else's word, which I don't want to take that away from, hey, if you like this, like and share it. But we do that. We don't listen. We see a face we know, or we see a message that's from a person that we've listened to before, or something along those lines, or it's somebody that just has like 550,000 followers, and we don't actually listen to what they say. We don't actually study what they say. It's just they're popular, so therefore the word must be good. So it's that continual pursuit of the truth on your own, because how can you be a disciple if you're not discipling to yourself? That should be the first person you do talk to. That's the first person that you do bring to God, is yourself, because you're the one that goes to him. You're the one that goes to him in prayer with your issues, with the things you need built up on. You're going to him, so why wouldn't you disciple to yourself? And you only do that by going through the truth. The fourth one she came up with is being a light by living a godly life. And that right there is another big one for me because for the longest time I was like, yeah, I'm Christian. I got baptized, I got rebaptized, but I was still doing things I wasn't supposed to do. I was still, uh, you know, and it was convictions that I was still doing. I was still smoking. So I got the conviction that I needed to stop smoking because if I was going to be, a Christian, then it was those things. If I had a thing that I was doing and I was like, if somebody sees me doing this, they're gonna be like, oh, I thought he was a Christian. I had the conviction to stop those things, and it was in that way living a godly life. So it was trying to be not saying those sentence enhancers as I call them, those foul words. It was trying to do the things that I was supposed to be doing, Bible study, getting up every morning and making sure I was reading and praying and doing all that. And it was getting away from those things that I was like, if God would have, because I thought about it this way, but God sees you all the time. But if God sees me doing this right now, would I be ashamed? And so it was pushing off those things, pushing off smoking and drinking and pornography, and it was stuff like that. Because it was like if I were caught basically doing one of those things by Jesus himself or somebody I looked up to, then that was something I needed to give up. So it's that as a disciple, we're supposed to move towards living that godly life. And by living that godly life, that means, those street preachers that all they do is condemn. They don't build up. They don't give the word. They just tell everybody they're going to go to hell. You have, I think back in the day, it was Westboro Baptist Church. Like they were that group that, they, like my last podcast, they found that one thing that they preached on that they said was the most important thing out of the entire Bible, not the other, millions of words. It was, that if they wanted to preach on if you were gay. So it's ensuring that you're looking at the whole message and you're living the whole godly life, not just I want to be famous or I want people to follow me or I think this is important, so I'm gonna go stand on a street corner and just tell you how bad you are doing it life and not tell you how God can give you a new life. 5, sacrificial service. So before I get into this one, there's a saying my pastor, I heard him say today, was if I hurt your feelings, know that Jesus is here to heal you. So sacrificial service. That's one of those things that is huge with me. Like if you say you love God, then why would you not help do the things of God? If you say you love God, why wouldn't you serve in some capacity? I think a lot of people feel that if by them serving, that's them driving to church. That's them, 4 times a week they drive to and from wherever they go to church at. But whenever like your church says, "Hey, we need help," we become busy. And I was that same person. That's why it resonates with me so much because I was that person. I was that person of I was showing up late to praise and worship, or I was showing up late to church because I didn't like or I wasn't used to the way they did things. Or I wouldn't serve because I had this thing I had to do at home. I had nothing to do at home except sit on my couch, watch TV, watch a game, play video games, do something, but it wasn't anything for God. It wasn't sacrificial service. It wasn't, and then a lot of people with that sacrificial service, they think that, that's the church taking advantage of me. The church, if you're going to the right church, if you're doing the right things for God, they're not taking advantage of you. Because if you're giving yourself to that service, then you're giving yourself to that service. Now, people can sometimes take advantage of that, but that's when you have to be biblically blunt. You have to go to your Bible, you have to go to it, and you have to, 1, study it out, 2, offer them grace, and then 3rd, call them out. I mean, go up to them and say, "Hey, what you're doing is wrong. You need to fix yourself. Or I'll fix you in a biblical, blunt kind of way." 6, genuine humility. Now, this one, I don't know. I agree with it, but it depends on your definition of humility. Because I've never and have never been one of those people that's like, super. I'm submissive to God, and I'm starting to become submissive to the people of God that He's placed in my life. But humility, she put do nothing. She got it from Philippians 2:3-4. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility. Value others above yourself, not looking at your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. This, Philippians 2:3-4. Obviously, I'm going to agree with it, but the very first thing I do agree: do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. That's how I've lived. I've tried to live my entire life. Now, I come across as, because I'm blunt, I've at times, people I work with probably tell you I have come across as arrogant. So with the selfish ambition, though, I've always tried to do that. Anything I've ever did, I've tried to do for other people. But it's ensuring that when you're doing the things of God and for God, you're not doing them for you. And that is why a lot of discipleship is dead, because people aren't doing it for the reasons they should be. They're not doing it for God. Like, that's why people get upset. I think there was a church that rather than discipling to this woman that just won the lottery, they sued her. Which that's a whole different section of the Bible they need to start looking into. But they sued this woman because she had said that she was going to give them some money. She didn't give them the amount of money. So the story is somewhere along those lines. But only reason they did what they did was out of vain conceit. You have preachers out there right now that, their church is more of a show. It's more for them to show out than for God to show up. It's more of a thing that, they're so prideful that they care about, what they look. I mean, you should care what you look like, but I mean, you shouldn't make a show of it. I mean, it's not something, that you're there to be seen. And so it's ensuring that you're doing everything for the right reasons. You're not looking for selfish ambition for yourself to build you up. Have the biggest church. Saying words like that. Like, the only reason I want to go into ministry, or the reason I want to go to ministry, is have the largest congregation. I want people from all over the world to watch me, instead of saying, hey, I want everybody across the world to be watching what God can do in their lives by hopefully using me. And then, rather in humility, value others above yourself. I'm working on that. Value others above yourself, because I have a good sense of self. So it's like valuing them above myself. I am working on that. Not looking at your own interests, but each of you in the interest of others. And that's another thing I'm working on, is, ensuring that, as I'm walking with Christ, that I'm looking out for others more than I'm looking out for myself. That with building them up, hopefully that if it's God's will, I'm built up as well. She said daily prayer and dependence on God. That's a must. I found that out, that is definitely a must, because if we rely on our own, we're not going to be able to do anything. We're not going to be able to do a thing. And she goes on to have a couple more that kind of get away from what I wanted to talk about with the dead discipleship. So I also found Galatians 2:14. When I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas, in front of them all, you are a Jew, yet you live like a Gentile and not like a Jew. How is it then that if you force Gentiles to follow Jewish customs? So in regards to this, when it's called dead discipleship, is when we're around non-Christians, a lot of the time, both young and old, we don't act like Christians. When we're around people of God, we want to act like people of God. But you better not catch me, Saturday night or, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Because if you catch me then, you'd be like, oh, he goes to, such and such church. They go to where? Their pastor's who? Because if you're acting like the people that you shouldn't be acting like, then you're being fake. You're not being real. You're putting on an act, and God isn't an act. He's not an act in my life. And it's also being able to correct those. It doesn't matter how old you are. We have a huge youth population at our church, and if I was acting out of character, that kid should be able to come tell me, sir, you're doing this, and I thought you were this type of person. And you as a man, a woman, whatever, you should be able to do the same thing. If we're all people of God, and what's even more humbling is when you have those people that don't know Christ, that haven't accepted him as their Lord and Savior. They're the ones correcting you, or they're the ones saying, "Hey, you're not acting the way you normally act, or you're not acting the way that you say you are on social media." That's why you have these pastors that they fall because they're acting one way for one group of people, and they're acting like themselves or another way in front of another people. So it's ensuring that you're being the same person all the time, so that your discipleship doesn't become a dead thing, a lifeless thing, because it's not being built up continuously. The next verse that I came up with whenever I was doing the study was 1 Corinthians 5:12-13. What business is it of mine to judge those outside the church? Are you not to judge those inside? God will judge those outside. Expel the wicked person from among you. And what that is saying is, I don't take that like you're supposed to help people, like that saying, only God can judge me. That is, we use that. We take that one part of a verse and use that to justify every single act we do. Like, oh, I'm going to do this, and it goes along with the dead discipleship stuff I mentioned earlier. We'll act how we want to outside of Sundays and Wednesdays, and then when we're caught, be like, only God can judge me. No, only God's allowed to be the persecution, the one that carries out the judgment. We are to tell one another about God. We are to tell one another, hey, what you're doing is against God. And we should do it even more with the people in church, because those people in church, those people that call themselves and are supposed to be acting like they are Christians, are those disciples that are supposed to go out. So it is, again, when they go out and do the things that aren't of God, then they become that dead discipleship, which is what we have in society today. We have these things where, and I've seen it, and it was a reason why for the longest time I wasn't doing the things that, like, now at 42, almost 43, I'm like, man, I'm upset about myself because I could have been doing this so much sooner. But it was the dead discipleship that pushed me, got me in my feelings, got my feelings hurt, that pushed me away. There was things when I was a real little kid that I saw these people that were supposed to be Christians, and the stuff they were doing, it was like, okay, that's not what they're supposed to be doing. So that pushed me away. Then, as I got older, it was that, bless you, we love you. But then they would see, me or my brother or, whatever, a family in crisis or a family needing help. And all they would say are, hopes and prayers. They weren't offering that assistance that they said, Jesus gave, that disciples gave. And it was that thing of, seeing somebody say one thing to your face, and then them turning their back on you, or lying, doing rumors, not being, they'd smile and be friendly, but then they wouldn't be friendly all the time. They wouldn't be helpful all the time. They weren't serving. They weren't doing any of the stuff that the Bible said we're supposed to do, and the things we saw in the Bible the disciples do. And we're all called to be disciples. We all are disciples, even if you're a disciple to yourself. So that was those things that that pushed me away. So I can only imagine in today's society what people see whenever they see, okay, you're a Christian, but you've changed God's word to allow this, and this. So how are you a Christian? You say you're a disciple, but you're being selfish. You say you're a disciple, but you're not doing this. And now, yes, of course, in society, you're going to have these people who are just they don't know the Bible, they don't know God, but they think they know the Bible because they saw a verse once, or they saw one of those random posts that you have to copy and paste. So you have to do this. You have to. Only God can judge me. You can't do this. You can't do this. When they don't know, they took a paragraph, and that verse they gave didn't even have a period, because the right next to it where there is a period, meaning the sentence is done. It totally goes against the point they're trying to make. So with dead discipleship, you have to ensure that within your own life, it's no longer dead. Discipleship does not need to be, and it shouldn't be just something that's cool in the moment. It shouldn't be something that your pastor, your evangelist, your parents force you to do, or say, hey, it'd be a good idea if, and then you do it one time. But then you don't see it ever again. And it shouldn't be one of those things that you jump on, and copy and paste, and try to scare or tell people that if they love God, they're gonna like and share it, and if they hate God, that they are gonna just scroll on past, because that's not biblical. That pushes that idea that discipleship isn't real, that people aren't real, that Christianity isn't real, and we have to be biblically blunt with our discipleship, because that is what's going to allow people to see what God is really for and what God is really against, and also to ensure that we create new disciples so that when God comes again, we're ready.